Um, Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Shining the Light on Our Community. I'm your host this evening, Gretchen Theakson, and I have with me Amy Todisco all the way from Vermont. Happy to have you here, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you for
And thank you
coming and
so much.
having a chat with us. If
My
you could
pleasure.
give us a quick, okay, you've got a fantastic bio, and I'd like people to hear, excuse me, all the amazing things that you've been doing in your life because I think we're going to touch on quite a few things.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you. It's definitely been an interesting journey. Um, so currently what I'm doing is I call myself an eco-friendly transformational coach, mentor, and retreat leader. And so I'm coaching year round. I have retreats on our organic farm in Vermont. And then during the summer season, I also do some unique food and farm tours and agricultural programs. So I love sustainable ag, and that's something that I love to share and inspire people with as well. So it's a little bit of a variety of things.
I also understand that you're an author.
Yes, I was in one of those compilation books with a bunch of other authors, so I had a chapter. But actually, one thing that I did myself was I was technical editor of the Green Living for Dummies book because I've been into green living for over 30 years.
Okay. And what prompted you to start working in the green living space? What was it
That's
that
a
drew you to it?
It's a great question. So it actually all started with letters to the editor of a local newspaper in the town that I used to live in Massachusetts. And I started a conversation based on my history of being very interested in health food and working at health food stores and holistic health. And then I discovered this little paperback book at a health food store called The Non-Toxic Baby, and learned that there were all these toxic synthetic chemicals in everyday household products, which was shocking. And so I started to kind of go on this mission, almost a research project of learning what all that was, what is
Hmm.
in everyday products, and what can I use instead that was actually safer and non-toxic. And so that just kind of led me into this whole world of green living. And so I started a conversation in my community just to kind of get things discussed. And then as things progressed and the community started to wake up, I created an event that was this big Earth Day event that was sort of showcasing workshops on how to live a greener lifestyle. And we had, a farmer come and do some demonstrations, and we had vendors that were selling green products and organic food and live music. And then from that spawned some nonprofits, including a fairly large one that I co-founded with another person. We discovered that there were 3 types of cancer above the state average in this little tiny seacoast community, and we wanted to know why. And so we sort of partnered with the state, but mostly we were looking at the potential environmental causes of this cancer. So that's kind of reinforced the whole green living message.
Hmm.
So that's kind of how I got started with the green living piece, to the point where I actually almost got to have Oprah come and interview me.
Wow.
I've lived in Vermont now the longest of anywhere else. I've been here now 21 years. And I think it was about 15 or 16 years ago, I got a call from one of her producers. And I was, at that point, I was ranking fairly high on Google for green living expert because there weren't as many of us. And I was, doing a lot to educate folks. And so it was very exciting for a moment to think that she was actually going to come. But as it turned out, she ended up going with a nonprofit at the last minute. So I'm like, all right, I'm waiting for Super Soul Sunday conversations to have that happen.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. That actually parallels a lot of the things that I've discovered through my life in nursing and raising children myself.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, because as you are aware, in hospitals, we use some pretty potent toxic cleaners.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I wanted to make sure that my home was not full of all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I too went down the green rabbit hole. What can I use in my home that is going to do an effective job, keep us healthy, not worry
Yes.
too much about we all need healthy bacteria. It's not about the bacteria. It's about keeping
Exactly.
the spaces clean and healthy so my kids can play on the floor and not worry about it too
Right.
much and all that kind of
Right.
stuff. So
And actually, along those same lines, I don't, you've probably heard that farmers' children tend to be the healthier of children
yeah,
because of the things that they're exposed to. And I
right.
absolutely believe that. Yeah.
Yeah, my
Training the immune system, right?
yeah, like my mother grew up on a farm and I spent a lot of years going there every summer.
Oh, wow.
So we spent a lot of time on the farm and out on the Atlantic Ocean in a cottage that we had there and traveling around all the different states and countries of Canada. So playing in the dirt was just something we did naturally.
Yeah.
So when my kids came along, we'd go to the park and get filthy. We'd go and take hikes and get filthy and go
Yeah.
camping and get filthy. It's just like whatever.
That's
Like
awesome.
it's all good. And we had, an organic garden in our backyard as well. So
Oh, that's
the kids were
wonderful.
used to growing their own food and things like that when they were
Wow.
younger. So
Well,
right behind you on that stuff.
yeah, and there's a fun fact about actually breathing the healthy microorganisms in, soil that's alive, which would be on an organic farm, right? It has
Yeah.
this serotonin boost for the brain, that happy hormone.
Yeah. My kids used to, I homeschooled my kids until they were, well, only one of them actually went to school and he decided to do that in high school.
Oh, wow.
So they were homeschooled all the time and they used to take themselves off to the park with a little scientific kit that they had developed themselves and
Oh,
collect dirt from different parts of the park and see what kind of bugs they could find and pieces of all the different plants and they'd bring them
how
all home and lay
cool.
them out. Yeah.
Wow. The
So
beauty of homeschooled children.
yeah, so like I didn't care. It's just like, go get dirty, do something interesting. And they'd been watching CSI or something. And the next thing I know, they're out there with their little kids doing stuff. So it's kind
That's
of cool.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the advantage is of having children in populations that are growing up in lower toxic environments results in what for our communities?
Well, I can speak specifically about the the immune system of those children because my daughter was a perfect example. When all these other kids were getting sick because she ended up, going to school as opposed to homeschooling like your kids, which I did consider. She, I mean, never got sick, and it was kind of amazing because everybody else's kids were getting sick. It was just expected. People were saying, oh yeah, kids get sick all the time, but she did not. And so I
Yeah.
think that had a lot to do with eating the organic food and non-toxic, products in the home and just being outdoors and, just making sure you're dressed properly for the weather is really
Yeah. 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 I think I can count on one hand the amount of antibiotics that have gone through our house.
yeah. And I think sort of on the larger scale, the reason why I think that's so important to live that way is because I believe, and I think you will too, being, with your training and everything, that the immune system of all of our bodies is designed to heal us. And if we get out of the way and allow that system to heal because we're not filling ourselves with toxic chemicals, then, things are going to be much better for us. We're not going to, have all the different ailments and get on all the prescription drugs that many people seem to be on. So it just
Mm.
feels like that's the way we were designed to live. And if we can, make sure we take in the things that support us, then we're going to have much better outcomes.
I totally agree. This was one of the things that frustrated me with the healthcare system when I
I
was
can only imagine.
mm, the stories.
Oh,
Anyway, moving
yeah.
on. So you
Yep.
also do quite a bit of coaching. What kind of coaching do you? You
Yes.
said you did transformational coaching. What is
Yeah.
one of the key ingredients in your coaching that you like people to focus on?
So typically the starting point that I like to go with folks is to look from the big perspective. And so what that is vision boards. And so I actually host a monthly free live interactive vision board secrets masterclass with the idea of helping people to get really clear on what it is they want and equally important, why they want that. Like what will having this thing do for you that you don't currently have in your life? And so looking at it from that lens of, thinking big, not limiting ourselves to, oh, well, what's attainable, what's achievable, that is not the place for a vision board. A vision board, in my opinion, is where you want to think big and really go for the things that you believe, you're meant to have. And I think that, we're all basically supposed to be here to have experiences, to grow and to learn. And if we tune into that soul part of ourselves, then we're going to end up following a much better path than if we're, distracted by doing what somebody else thinks we should do, or, making decisions that are not necessarily in our, for our best and highest self. So I think vision boards really have worked for me amazingly over 35 years. I mean, I wouldn't be living on an organic farm in Vermont doing the work that I do, because I'm a former New York City girl. And I never felt like that was a fit for me. And so I would envision, what did I want? And I knew that my surroundings were very important to me. And I wanted to live in a nature-filled place because I'm super into, being outdoors and with animals and plants. And that wasn't really possible in New York City, or even suburbs for that matter.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
yeah, just using these vision boards as that first step towards manifesting a life of my dreams, which is what I help other people do.
Yeah, do you find that sometimes people have a lot of resistance about being completely audacious about
Absolutely.
looking at the end story of where they want their life to be?
Yes, because we all have these beliefs often that are very limiting. And so I think part of the work that I have as a coach is to help people identify what those beliefs are and reframe things and, let those things go that don't serve them. Because I think that's really, it's sort of like back to the immune system. If you give yourself all the things that you need to thrive and remove those toxic thoughts, in this case, then things go more smoothly. Then, opportunities and people and things start to, appear for you in a sort of synchronistic way that might not otherwise have happened.
And what do you find that most, okay, let me just start that one over again.
Sure.
What is the most frequent block that is in the way for people to move forward? What is the one thing that you see cropping up over and over again?
Well, I think it's that most of us do not love ourselves. And I just heard that statistic last week I was told 90% of us do not love ourselves. And so imagining a world of people that don't love themselves, it's so much harder to, share love in a connection with somebody else, friendship or, romantic, doesn't matter, if we don't first love ourselves. And so I think people tend to act out in ways that are unhealthy if we aren't first loving ourselves. And so I think that that's probably the most common thing that's in the way.
That's interesting, because the tribe that I run inside our community is called Self-Love Puzzle Pieces, and it's all about finding all those pieces and bringing them into line with yourself, because as far as I'm concerned, self-love is the strongest pillar and the best way forward in your life, regardless of what you do.
Agreed. And it's one of the pillars, I think, of whenever I'm working with somebody on relationships.
Yeah.
The first is the relationship with ourselves, right? If we don't know ourselves, if we don't know how we show up to others, beyond even the loving ourselves piece, that also gets in the way, because too many times I've seen people say, well, I thought, that I was this way. And then the feedback from the people in their life says, not quite.
Not quite.
That's
yeah.
not exactly how I'm experiencing you.
Yeah. It's interesting how, when we start asking other people in our life how they perceive us, how often we get surprised by some of the answers.
Yes. Both positively and negatively, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Because sometimes along with that lack of self-love, we don't necessarily know all the wonderful things about us or the things that people see about us.
Yeah. I think it's important for us to know both those things.
Agreed.
The only way you get to be a whole person is to understand that along with the love you carry for yourself, there's also parts of you that you still have to heal.
Right. And to me, it feels like it's a lifelong process, right? I mean,
yeah.
Right. I mean, I've been doing this kind of work on myself, believe it or not, since I was 13. My mother had taken this S training. And so she sent my sister and me, and I ended up going to the adult training. And it was literally life-changing, because the main thing that I got out of it was that we do create our own reality, that we have that power to be able to be the architects of our lives. And a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah. I think it's the one thing that I see cropping up over and over again in workspaces, in families, and in communities is that we don't allow love to have a place at the table consistently, regardless of what we're doing, whether it's for ourselves or for other people. We live in a society where I don't want is more prevalent than I would really desire. I think we've got it backwards.
Yeah, and just thinking about, the school shootings and the toxic divisiveness between people, to me, it all boils down to this lack of self-love and a lack of empathy. I mean, I'm shocked constantly hearing about the way, kids behave towards each other, particularly teens, that call each other friends, because we have a nephew who's 14 and I'm just like, holy mackerel. I'm so glad I'm not in school at his age again, because it seems way worse than I remembered it.
Yeah, like sometimes my son is online with his friends a lot doing gaming stuff, and
Yes.
they get a little carried away, and I'm like, I would never use it. He goes, and he said to me, I would, oh, it's us just having, a lot of fun. And I'm like, I would never say anything like that to someone who I considered a friend. It wouldn't enter my
Right.
mind. And
Exactly.
I'm just like, I don't understand where all this is coming. Is it coming from media? Is it coming from, I don't know, the television? Is it coming from stories that they heard? I'm
Yeah.
trying to
Good
find
question.
where this thread is going, because I don't remember that kind of language being around when I was younger.
No,
It's
I
a
mean,
little
I was very
scary.
fortunate that I didn't ever get bullied, but even back in our days, I'm assuming you're somewhere in the same realm of age as I am.
I am.
I don't remember the cruelty that I see happening. I mean, I guess it depended. Perhaps if I were on the other side of being bullied, then I would have been more aware of that. But I think
Yeah.
it's more like what you're saying, that the way friends or people who consider themselves friends talk to each other is different than anything that I've ever experienced.
Yeah. I mean, we moved around a lot when I was a kid because my dad was in the army. So I was always the new kid in the block.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, I think I went to 7 schools before I finally left. I said I kind of had enough.
Wow.
And it wasn't always moving in the summertime where you had time to meet the other people in your
Oh,
neighborhood. Sometimes it was like 1 week into school or halfway through the
yikes.
year or 1 month before it ended. So building
Gee.
relationships was, in some cases, impossible.
Yeah.
And I eventually just stopped trying because honestly, it's
Hmm.
so much work when you go to a new school and you have to kind of slide your way into a clique.
Yeah.
So being
Oh, I can only
bullied kind of
imagine.
just went with being bullied just kind of went with the territory.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know anybody from any of the schools I went to. I have
Yeah.
no relationship, and there was a lot of them. So I just have no relationship with any of them. But I don't remember hearing that language around, like directed at like the kind of things that they say now. I mean, it wasn't nice stuff what they were saying, but it
Yeah.
wasn't to the degree that I hear kids talking about now. So
Yeah.
I'd like to find a way to stop it because I'm like, that's probably not good for your soul.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't even like watching programs and movies that have violence in them. I'm not interested. It's too
Yeah.
much negative energy.
But we don't even have cable anymore.
Oh, yeah.
We only have Netflix and
Yeah, us too. Apps.
yeah,
Fire
just
stick.
yeah.
Yeah.
We never watch the news. And my son said, "Why?" And
Oh
I said,
gosh,
"Let me
neither do
ask you
I.
this: how do you feel after you watch 10 minutes of the news?" He goes, "Yeah, it's a pretty sick world out there." I said, "Actually, it's a very happy world. You're just getting the highlights." So that you're going to become addicted to this kind of behavior, numb your brain, and then you're going to go out and see it and walk away. I said, I want that for
Exactly.
you and
Well,
everybody else.
we all know that, if it bleeds, it leads. And so they're not going to tell us the good news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we all need to get together and start the good news for webcasting.
Well, it's funny, people have done that and they don't get the kind of viewership that all the negative doom and gloom stuff does.
Well, persistence and invention can lead the way
Yes.
in some things. I guess we'll just
Yes.
have to find a way. What we need to do is continue to connect in conversations like this and share it with all the people that we know.
Absolutely.
Um, there are some amazing podcasts out there that are not focusing on the bad stuff that is going on, but it's actually, there's a couple that are actually doing organic stuff and green living stuff. There's a few that are looking at soul alignment, intuition, harmony, all the compassion,
Oh
empathy.
yeah.
So it's
There's
all
some
out
great
there.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I listen to podcasts during the day when I'm cleaning or out shopping and stuff, so that I don't have to listen to all the other
What's your
interesting things that's
favorite?
going
Do you
on.
have a favorite?
Um, Joanna Hunter does one called I got it, the Into the Lightwood,
Huh. Okay. I'll have to
and
check that one out.
she talks to she has a series where she talks to different people who are making a difference in their communities and the stories that brought them to where they are and how they managed to become millionaires so that they could help the
Oh,
communities
wow.
that they're living in. Yeah, it's really
Ooh, that's
interesting.
cool. Joanna, what was the
Yeah,
last name?
Joanna Hunter,
Hunter. All right, I'm gonna have to
Into
check
the
that one out.
Lightwood. Yeah, I
Cool.
do enjoy that one. It's really good. And Jay Shetty.
Don't know that one either.
Okay, he was a monk for 3 years, and after that he wanted to do something that would bring communities together and further people's ability to connect on a more meaningful level in life, regardless of what they did. So he interviews really incredible people that are sprinkled throughout different organizations, businesses. Like he speaks to some really powerful men and women about what changed in their life
Hmm.
and about compassion and empathy and how to create community. And yeah,
Oh,
he's
wow.
really
That sounds
inspiring. Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, it's I think those are probably my two favorite. I really enjoy listening to those and I listen to them over and over because they're really good. But yeah, I
Cool.
like
Like check them
finding
out.
people. I like finding people that are trying to make a change in life.
Yeah, there's a really new, not new guy, but a new to me, Dr. Zach Bush. Have you ever heard of him?
I have.
Yeah, so he's got a new program that's just starting, and it's something to do with sustainable farmers and
Oh, beautiful.
holistic living. And yeah, I just signed up for it. I think it's starting soon, but
Yeah,
it looked like a very intriguing conversation.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
So, how do people who live in suburbs in the cities start to take advantage of green living and improve their health?
Well, so if there's green spaces, which I know that, for example, New York City Central Park is quite nice these days, unlike when I grew up there. And so spending time outside, on the grass, walking around and just sort of being present to the trees and whatever's growing there. That's one step. But I think what I typically talk to people about is what they're eating, because I truly do believe that our food is our medicine. And so for me, that means a whole food, nutrient dense, organic diet. And
Mm.
I happen to be an omnivore, even though philosophically I'm probably more of a vegetarian, but I don't do well on a vegetarian diet. And I know that my physiology, demands a high protein, high fat diet. So I think that, eating as cleanly as possible is super important, because then it's just like we were talking about in the beginning, giving our bodies what we need to be able to thrive. And that allows us to also deal with some of the toxic load, that we're inevitably exposed to. Even living in Vermont, we still have toxins here too.
Sure.
Not as many as a city or a suburb. So, and then the next step would be to look at what's in your home. What are you using for cleaning products and body care products? Do you have synthetic carpets on the floor? What are you using for paint and stains? And, definitely pesticides are a no-no. But there's a lot of things that people can do, steps that they can take about their own indoor space, because, the EPA even talks about the fact that the indoor air is more toxic within our homes than even some of the most toxic air outside. And we're inside most of the time. So we're being exposed to whatever is in our indoor air environment.
Right.
And so cleaning that up does a lot to help.
Yeah. And
Those are a
I
couple.
do know that there's a study called the Heart Study that proved that using the cleaners that you buy at the supermarket results in microabrasions and death to lung tissue in a
Oh,
higher rate than people who are smoking a pack
oh
of
my
cigarettes
God.
for 20 years.
Oh
And
my
this was a
gosh. I
study
hadn't heard
done,
that. Gonna
this
write
was a
that down.
study that was done over 20 years.
Jeez.
Yeah. I
That's
I came across
terrifying.
that. Yeah. It's called the Heart Study. Was it the World Health Organization? I can't remember. It might have been them who did it, but you can find it
Huh.
online.
Okay. I will
Anybody can
definitely
go
look
and look
that
it
up.
up. But,
Wow.
and as a nurse, I already knew that it was a problem because I could tell when I had worked like 2 or 3 days in a row and I worked in emergency and we used a lot of cleaners in there because we had a lot of
Oh,
gross stuff going on.
yeah.
And I would get a sore throat and I'd get a headache and my eyes would ache and I'd have to take a couple days off just to kind of
Jeez.
go
So,
out for a walk at the
even
park.
yeah, even just walking through the grocery store in the cleaning aisle, I go as quickly as I can. I'm
Me
not
too.
chemically sensitive, but I am definitely not not aware, like not not just too aware of what's in it, but it does actually have a physical response. Something like what you're saying. Like sometimes my nose will burn if I breathe, some of that stuff. Or I know I've been, at a theater, for example, and there's some woman or man that's wearing a heavy dose of perfume or cologne.
Yeah.
I have to move away. It's like,
Yeah, I'm the same way. I actually found out quite by accident because I was having a lot of respiratory issues. It wasn't an infection or anything. It was just bothering me all the time that I am highly sensitive to a lot of chemicals that are in cleaning agents.
I'm not surprised. And somebody once described it as sort of imagining the human body as a rain barrel, and you keep filling that barrel up
Yeah.
until when you finally start to overflow, that's when you start to have so many different symptoms. And, then it's this whole process of trying to clean out that stuff and not keep
Are
adding.
there are there any products in the stores these days that are actually healthier than others, or do we really have to resort to making our own? I mean, I make a lot of my own, so I don't
Yeah,
really
I
care,
mean,
but
I think there are, and what I typically do is I go to the EWG.org website, which stands
right.
for Environmental Working Group, right?
Yeah.
And so they do a lot of that research to figure out, they compare the different chemicals in each product and, what the risks are, and then they compare the different products to each other. So yes, there are some products that are definitely better than others. Having said that, though, there's certain name brands that I feel like they're not always staying at the same place, that depending upon who's owning them or running the company,
I agree.
things change. And then one of the saddest things is to see these great small companies that then get bought up by big companies, and then
Yeah.
things start to change. So
Yeah.
we've way too much of that.
I tell people, even if you've been using this for 20 years
Hmm.
and it's been bought at any time, you need to go and
Hmm.
find out who bought them and if they changed the formula. Because some of the
Exactly.
brands that I used to use, I don't use anymore
Yeah,
because they changed the formulation. And I'm like,
exactly.
yeah,
I mean,
because it's cheaper.
some of the standard things that I believe have not changed are things like Dr. Bronner's Castile soap. We have Vermont Soap Company here that is very good as well. Bon Ami, to my knowledge, is still the same,
It is,
product
yeah.
as it's always been. Distilled white vinegar. Um, even getting cellulose sponges that don't have any sort of I don't know if it's microban or what they treat them with, but if the package says resists odors, then it's actually got something, on the
Something in it.
sponges. Whereas
Yeah.
if it doesn't, and you get it from a health food store, typically those sponges are just cellulose.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's so many different things to look at. I mean, just fluoride in toothpaste is another thing that I got rid of years and years ago.
Mm.
Um, there's a lot of
There's a lot.
places where chemicals are hiding.
Oh, they're everywhere and they are insidious and it can be
Yeah.
really tough some days. And for a new
And for our
mother,
pets too.
yeah. And for a new mother, the hospital sends you home with a
Mm.
bunch of Pampers and all the, and
Oh
I'm like,
gosh. Ugh.
can't we just, like, I used cloth for a long time, um, because I could wash it in my own detergent
Yep,
and I could hang it out on the line in the summertime.
exactly.
Or like it's works the same as the other stuff. It's better for everybody's butt, and your kids don't really care.
Right. As long as they're dry and clean.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think that, I don't know if you'll agree, but our life of convenience is actually costing us more than taking the time and trouble to do for
Absolutely.
ourselves.
I would
Yeah,
totally agree with that, to the point where I make just about all of our meals every day from scratch.
I do.
I mean, even as a busy, business owner, that is so important to me. And actually, I really, I don't necessarily enjoy eating out because I know that it's not going to be the same kind of quality.
Hmm.
I like the convenience of, being able to go out to eat and have somebody else take care of all of that.
Sure.
But ultimately, I really prefer my own homemade stuff.
So now with the cost of food being so high, especially organic produce and the supply chain problems that we've been
Yep.
having the past 3 years, what can people do to stay within their budget? What kind of things can they make last a little longer, stretch out, or
Mhm.
I don't know. Like I just use squash and everything all winter long because it's cheap, it's abundant, and it's always
Yeah.
organic. So that's a
Yeah.
good
I mean,
one. But
that's a good one. I
a lot
think
of people don't know how to cook it.
exactly.
So
Well, and
many.
so because of the internet, we have so many, ways to get that information fairly easily. I think some of the good things that we can do is learn how to grow your own, first of all. To have that ability is kind of important. And then learning how to preserve food. So it's funny, I never really liked beets all that much earlier in my life, except for when they were pickled. But in the last couple of years, we've started, you know, making baby beets with the greens, just sauteing it with butter and garlic, and it's phenomenal. And then this year we've had an abundance of beets, so I've been pickling up a storm and
This is
giving
good
them
for
away to
you.
people and stuff, and storing them in the refrigerator. So one of the things that I do, one of the strategies is when things are on sale that I would normally buy, I buy a bunch of them, especially if
Okay.
it's a good sale.
Yeah.
Buying directly from a farm as opposed to a store, definitely most of the time will save you money. Because
Hmm.
if you think about it, the farm is who's growing it and they're selling it at a certain cost, but when it's sold to a store, they mark it up.
Yeah.
So you're most likely going to get a much better price from a CSA at a farm, or just a farm stand, or a farmer's market, because
Yeah.
those farms
We
going
have a
direct.
plethora of farmers markets
So
during
that's
the
another
season.
awesome thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so between those things and even, community gardens, if you don't know how to grow yourself, maybe, do it with a neighbor or a friend or a family member, and then you can
Right.
learn from the other people around you. And I mean,
Yeah.
it's so easy to access that information now too, that
Yeah.
it's, start with 2 or 3 things that you really like to eat and then grow
Mhm.
those. And then once you get, more confident, you can add more
So how do we convince people that your backyard can actually feed your neighborhood?
by seeing other people that are doing it. I think that's one way. And there's another cool thing that we have now that I didn't know about for, I don't know if it was even very widely available in the US, but hydroponic growing, where it's
Yeah.
growing in water, right? So I guess Disney showcased that 40, 50 years ago. I don't even remember that when I went there at that time. But I have like this little homeowner sized hydroponic system, which I'm currently here in Vermont, snow on the ground outdoors. I'm growing cucumbers, arugula, and mixed kale. And I just harvested some kale and arugula for our salad tonight.
Oh, nice.
That's something that, the cost of it is not super high, but, it's like $500 maybe, I think, at the most. But the ability to grow food year round inside your home
Mm.
is kind of a cool thing,
Yeah.
especially when you live in a cold climate like I do. So that's another way to add, more fresh stuff to your diet, that
Hmm.
you're controlling, the process so you know what's in it.
Right. Do you think having education in this kind of thing from the time our kids first hit school
Absolutely. I think
will
that's imperative.
result in more people taking advantage of their natural environments?
I see it happening. I mean, I know in Vermont, gardening in schools is a big deal. Like even our local elementary school, they have a school garden right outside the building, and that's part of the curriculum. And some schools, like Waldorf schools, that's a big part of their curriculum. So I think that the more children are exposed to growing their own food and ideally being on farms, the better that is for all of us. Because then, well, I'll just give you an example. So these farm tours that I do in the summertime, I had a family that came with 3 kids. None of them ate vegetables at that point. And so the experience that I have them go through is, I talk a lot about what we do on our farm to make things healthy. And one of the key things is, a healthy soil is what you need to create healthy plants. And so there's a variety of different ways to do that. So I have them taste things as we go through the farm. So if, there's green beans growing, they get to pick their own green beans. They'll taste kale right off the plant. They'll pick cherry tomatoes, whatever's in season at that time. And so I heard from the family after the tour and after they'd gotten home, and the parents told me that now the kids are eating vegetables because all they have to say is, these are just like Amy's vegetables. And they got a taste for them fresh off the vine and they liked it.
Yeah.
So that was really kind of neat.
That's really nice. Like that's pretty much how I mean, we always had a garden, at least.
That's awesome.
With, I don't know, we had like fruits and vegetables growing. We always had strawberry and blueberry bushes growing, and
nice.
I don't even crabapple in the trees, and we learned how to stew that down, and rhubarb and everything else. So I was very fortunate to live in a house where that was something that was the norm.
Absolutely.
Which I passed on to my kids, and all my kids can cook, and all my kids can shop,
great.
and they know what, and they all eat their vegetables.
All right, so you're proof of this this working.
I do have to tell you a funny story. One of my daughters was leaving the house with her boyfriend at the time, and he was saying, "We need to hurry. You don't know how important coffee is for me." And she turned and looked at him and said, "You don't understand how important vegetables are to me." And she stormed out of the house.
Oh my gosh.
I thought that, and this was a teenager at the time. I think she was 17 at the time. And I'm like, I did something right.
Yes, indeed. That is phenomenal.
Was hilarious. I want to hear more kids saying stuff like that,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm in agreement with all these things that you're doing. I wish I would like to find a way to pass that on to more people in community. Like I live in Toronto.
Yep.
I'm very fortunate. I live by the beach.
Oh,
I've got
nice.
huge parks right by me. I'm right by Lake Ontario. I can go down and I can walk. I don't have any room to plant a garden, but at least I can go down and walk on the beach and hang out in the park and take my dog down. But I see all these people with these magnificent blooms in front of their house, and I keep thinking, where's the broccoli? Who's who's growing the kale? How come nobody has any spinach? Where'd that apple tree go?
Right. And what are they spraying on these?
Yeah. Like everybody's out cutting their grass and spraying this and that. And I'm like, they're raking their leaves. And I'm like, why are you raking your leaves? It's going to great nutrient for the soil.
Right. And I think it's an education issue, honestly. Okay. I think that, so back when I lived in that community where I started writing the letters to the editor, it was a pretty wealthy community, and everyone had these little postage stamp sized lawns, and everyone was spraying with pesticides, and you'd constantly see those little yellow flags. Yeah. And we then, through the efforts of this nonprofit that I started, the Marblehead Cancer Prevention Project, we started to look at pesticides as one of the biggest contributions to these 3 types of cancer, as I mentioned. Yeah. And so thankfully, I was able to work with our local Board of Health back then, and they put much more stringent rules in place so that people couldn't just indiscriminately spray. And they were really trying to push people to stop spraying, because, if you have a yard and you don't want to spray and you want to have a garden, but your neighbor is spraying, especially if they're spraying their trees, good luck to you, because their stuff is going to drift over. So I think unfortunately, as humans, we tend to wait for crises to motivate us to change. I wish that were not the case, but
Yeah.
sometimes those types of incidents wake people up and it makes them learn about other ways of doing things. And then hopefully that information spreads and they can share it with other people.
Mm. I like that idea.
But just
I mean,
as
go ahead.
just one last thought, I was thinking to answer your question about people in cities. You know, if you have a sunny windowsill, you can grow a little bunch of herbs.
Yes, that is true. And
So
we
one thing
normally
to
do
start with.
that, but right now we have no furnace, so no heat. So we can't grow
Oh,
anything. Yeah, it's really
goodness.
cold. Yeah, that's
That's
why I'm
not
all
fun.
wrapped up in all kinds of layers here because
Oh,
it's quite cold in here.
oh dear.
Um, I found out recently that here in the city, they don't plant female trees.
Why?
Apparently they're too messy.
Wow.
So I think it's more than 60% of the trees in the city are male trees who don't now fertilize female trees.
Right. So they're
So
not producing flowers or fruit or, oh my gosh.
I don't know
That's wild.
because it's harder to clean up the seed pods than it is to clean up the leaves in the fall.
Wow.
And I went, I want to know who was in charge of that decision because the
Right.
amount of people that are running to their doctors for allergy medication because there is no balance in our ecosystem.
Wow. And that's just so unhealthy to be so one-sided like that. That's,
Yeah,
I can't imagine. What is that doing to pollinators and, you
exactly.
know, oh my gosh.
Like, so I have a bunch of
Oof.
trees that are out in the lot behind me and they're all dying because I don't have any female trees.
Wow.
They're
I
all
would
male trees
definitely
and they're
look
all
into
dying.
that and
Yeah,
see who was responsible for that and get people aware because that's just
bad
crazy.
news. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, the whole street is lined with trees and I mean, there's a birch, a silver birch out in front of me that is rotting from the bottom up and the limbs are starting to come down because there
Wow.
isn't a silver birch for miles around.
So I mean it's counterintuitive because they're going to end up having to clean up all of these dead trees and all the damage that these trees are going to produce,
Right.
especially landing on people's homes and cars and that,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, that's such a short-sighted way of looking, but
But
that's
yeah,
sadly it's quite typical of,
it's
you know,
quite
what we
typical.
humans do.
Yeah, because this is an urban city and people want to be able to walk around and not have to clean their cars. And
Oh my word.
yeah, isn't that absolutely
So they'd
crazy? Like
rather
this,
live in a more sterile kind of, eesh.
yeah. So these are the things that I'm learning about. And our city, we have 3.8 million people here.
Oh wow.
We have a very big city. It takes an hour to cross the city.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's pretty like going from east to west. I think it takes an hour or so, and if it's rush
Okay.
hour, it takes you longer. So we
Wow.
live in a very big place, and yes, we have a lot of green spaces, but we're not protecting those green spaces because we're eliminating half the population of all of the species that are in there because
Wow.
the female trees are messy and they have sticky pods and like every excuse
Ugh,
under the sun. And I'm like, I think somebody is not thinking long term about what this
not at
is doing
all.
to our ecosystem here and how that's affecting the respiratory systems of all the people who are living around these male only trees.
Right. I
And
mean,
it just,
because
mm,
one of the things I've always heard is if you have seasonal allergies, they suggest you eat, you know, a teaspoon a day of local honey that's been produced in your area because then it's going to have the bees pollinating everything. But in your case, I don't think that's going to work.
that doesn't work very well.
Gee,
The plants are fine, but
it's the trees.
the trees,
So they are
and we
allowing
have,
male and female plants, just not female trees.
right. So
Wow.
our tree canopy is actually the one that's under threat, and people don't understand why some of them, as old as they are not producing the amount of foliage that
Right.
you would expect. Well, because they have no pollinating partner.
Right. They're missing something.
They're making
Yeah,
something.
that whole symbiosis thing. Oh my gosh.
Isn't
Well,
that,
that's
see?
something new that I've not heard before.
Yeah, I bet it's not only our city too. I bet
Oh, I'm
this is
sure you're
happening in
right.
a lot of places. But
Yeah.
I just found that completely fascinating as I was trying to figure out what was going on. I was seeing younger and younger kids with really bad respiratory problems,
Right.
older people really having to struggle when they were out in the summertime and in the spring trying to breathe and walk at the same time. What was going on? And this is what I found out. I thought,
Wow.
wow, yeah. Look at the effect it's having. Our emergency rooms are more full with older and younger people showing up with respiratory illnesses they should not have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Welcome to
Well,
the
you've
new
taught me
world.
something new. Yeah,
But
exactly.
I'm going back to when you were talking about vision boards, and I know how important they are, and I've seen them work magic in people's lives.
Yeah.
Now, the course you said you do a master class. Is it a monthly master class that you
Yep.
do?
Yep. So I just did one last Saturday, and the next one will be Saturday, December 10th. And it'll be
Okay.
noon till about 2 Eastern.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So we're going to do is we're going to collect all your information. We're going to put everything on underneath the recording of this. So
Oh,
what's
cool.
the best place for people to get in touch with you
So
if
my
they have
website is
questions?
probably the best place. So that's
Okay,
catalystforchangecoach.com.
very good. And
Yeah.
people can go in and ask questions and find out about your courses and everything
Oh,
else you're doing.
absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And, to sign up for the vision board class, you just go to the vision board tab on the website and there's a little, sign me up button, and that'll take you right to the form to get into my email so I can let you know what the Zoom room is and all the details.